The Day After Tomorrow is a 2004 American climate fiction disaster film co-written, directed, and produced by Roland Emmerich and starring Dennis Quaid, Jake Gyllenhaal, Ian Holm, Emmy Rossum, and Sela Ward. The film depicts fictional catastrophic climatic effects in a series of extreme weather events that usher in global cooling and leads to a new ice age. The film was made in Toronto and Montreal and is the highest-grossing Hollywood film to be made in Canada. Originally planned for release in the summer of 2003, The Day After Tomorrow premiered in Mexico City on May 17, 2004 and was released worldwide from May 26 to May 28 except in South Korea and Japan, where it was released June 4 to Euro 5, respectively. Plot: on an expedition in Antarctica, paleoclimatologist Jack Hall and his colleagues Frank and Jason are drilling for ice core samples on the Larsen ice shelf for the NOAA when the shelf breaks off. Later, Jack presents his findings on global warming at a United Nations conference in New Delhi, but fails to convince diplomats or Vice President of the United States Raymond Becker. However, Professor Terry Rapson of the Headland Climate Research Centre in Scotland believes in Jack's theories. Several buoys in the North Atlantic simultaneously show a massive drop in the ocean temperature, and Rapson concludes that melting polar ice has started to disrupt the North Atlantic current. He contacts Jack, whose paleoclimatological weather model shows how climate changes caused the first ice age. His team, along with NASA's meteorologist Janet Tokuda, builds a forecast model. Across the world, violent weather causes mass destruction. U.S. President Blake authorizes the FAA to suspend all air traffic due to severe turbulence after learning numerous tornadoes destroyed downtown Los Angeles. At the International Space Station, 3 astronauts see a huge storm system spanning the northern hemisphere, delaying their return home. The situation worsens when the storm system develops into 3 massive hurricane-like superstorms with eyes holding a 150 degree Fahrenheit temperatures that freezes anything it comes in contact with. The 3 cells are located over northern Canada, Siberia, and Scotland. The weather becomes increasingly violent, causing traffic-jammed Manhattan streets to become flooded knee-deep. Jack's son Sam, visiting New York City as he is participating in an academic decathlon, calls his father promising to be on the next train home, but flooding closes the subways and Grand Central Terminal. As the storm worsens, a massive wave hits Manhattan. Sam and his friends seek shelter with a large group of people in the New York Public Library, but not before his friend and love interest Laura gets injured. President Blake orders the evacuation of the southern states of the United States, causing almost all of the refugees to head to Mexico. Jack and his team set out for Manhattan to find his son. Their truck crashes into a block of ice, just past Philadelphia, so the group continues on snowshoes. Most of the group taking shelter in the library leaves when the water outside freezes, leaving just Sam and a few others. They burn books to stay alive and break into a vending machine for food. While journeying to New York, Frank falls through the glass roof of a snow-covered shopping mall. As Jason and Jack try to pull him up, the glass under them continues cracking and Frank sacrifices himself by cutting the rope. Laura appears to have a cold, so Sam comforts her and confesses his feelings for her. In Mexico, an urgent message reaches the refuge camp where most of the United States is taking refuge. Vice President Becker hears the urgent message from the Secretary of State that President Blake's motorcade was caught in the superstorm before it could make it to Mexico, causing Vice President Becker to be sworn in as the new president. The next morning, the group determined that Laura has blood poisoning from the cut on her leg, so Sam and 2 others search for penicillin in a derelict Russian cargo ship that drifted inland. The eye of the superstorm passes over the city and the 3 barely return to the library with the medicine in time. During the deep freeze, Jack and Jason take shelter in an abandoned Wendy's restaurant as Jack turns on the burners at the highest temperature. Upon reaching Manhattan, Jack and Jason discover the library buried in snow, but find Sam's group alive. New York has turned into a polar, subarctic city, completely frozen by reaching a 98 degree Fahrenheit. They radio this to the government in exile in Mexico and President Becker orders helicopters flown into New York, finding more survivors, President Becker orders search and rescue teams to look for other survivors as he gives his first address to the nation. The movie concludes with the astronauts looking down at Earth from the space station, showing most of the northern hemisphere covered in ice and snow, with one of the astronauts stating, "Look at that, have you ever seen the air so clear?" Cast: Dennis Quaid as Professor Jack Hall, Jake Gyllenhaal as Sam Hall, Emmy Rossum as Laura Chapman, Ian Holm as Professor Terry Rapson, Sela Ward as Dr. Lucy Hall, Christopher Britton as Vestine, R.J. Smith as Brian Parks, Dash Mihok as Jason Evans, J.O. Sanders as Frank Harris, Sasha Royce as Parker, Austin Nichols as J.D., Adrian Lester as Simon, Tamlin Tomata as Janet Tokuda, Glenn Plummer as Luther, Perry King as President Blake, Kenneth Welsh as Vice President Raymond Becker, Amy Sloan as Elsa, Sheila McCarthy as Judith, Nestor Serrano as Tom Gomez, Christian Tessier as Aaron. Production. The film was inspired by The Coming Global Superstorm, a book co-authored by Coast to Coast AM talk radio host Art Bell and Whitley Strieber. Strieber also wrote the film's novelization. The book The Sixth Winter, written by Douglas Orgill and John Gribbin and published in 1979, follows a similar theme. So does the novel Ice, by Arnold Federbush, published in 1978. Shortly before and during the release of the film, members of environmental and political advocacy groups distributed pamphlets to moviegoers describing what they believed to be the possible effects of global warming. Although the film depicts some effects of global warming predicted by scientists, such as rising sea levels, more destructive storms, and disruption of ocean currents and weather patterns, it depicts these events happening much more rapidly and severely than is considered scientifically plausible, and the theory that a superstorm will create rapid worldwide climate change does not appear in the scientific literature. When the film was playing in theaters, much criticism was directed at U.S. politicians concerning their rejection of the Kyoto Protocol and climate change. A film's scientific advisor was Dr. Michael Molitor, a leading climate change consultant who worked as a negotiator on the Kyoto Protocol. Reception, box office. Over its four-day Memorial Day opening, the film grossed $85,807,341. However, it still ranked number 2 for the weekend, behind Shrek 2's $95,578,365 four-day tally. However, The Day After Tomorrow led the per-theater average chart with a four-day average of $25,053, compared to Shrek 2's four-day average of $22,633. At the end of its box office run, the film grossed $186,740,799 domestically and $544,272,402 worldwide. The film did well at the box office, grossing $544,272,402 internationally. It is the sixth highest-grossing film not to be number 1 in the United States. However, worldwide, it is third behind only Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs and Casino Royale. Critical reaction: The Day After Tomorrow generated mixed reviews from both the science and entertainment communities. The online entertainment guide, Rotten Tomatoes, rated the film at 45%, with an average rating of 5.3/10. The site's general consensus states that it was a ludicrous popcorn flick filled with clunky dialogues, but spectacular visuals save it from being a total disaster. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times praised the film's special effects, giving the film 3 stars out of 4. Environmental activist and The Guardian columnist George Monbiot called The Day After Tomorrow a great movie and lousy science. In a USA Today editorial by Patrick J. Michaels, a research professor of environmental sciences at the University of Virginia who rejects the scientific evidence for global warming, Michaels called the film propaganda, noting, "As a scientist, I bristle when lies dressed up as science are used to influence political discourse." In a Space Daily editorial by Joseph Guthines, a college instructor and retired NASA Office of Inspector General, senior special agent, Guthines called the film a cheap thrill ride, which many weak-minded people will jump on and stay on for the rest of their lives. Paleoclimatologist William Hyde of Duke University was asked on Usenet whether he would be seeing the film. he responded that he would not unless someone were to offer him $100. Other readers of the news group took this as a challenge, and raised the necessary funds. Hyde's review criticized the film's portrayal of weather phenomena that stopped at national borders, and finished by saying that it was to climate science as Frankenstein is to heart transplant surgery, as quoted in New Scientist. However, Stefan Rahmstorff of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, expert for Merlin ocean circulation and its effects on climate, was impressed how the scriptwriter Jeffrey Nachmanoff was well informed about the science and politics of global climate change after the talk with him at the preview of the film in Berlin. He stated, "Clearly this is a disaster movie and not a scientific documentary. The filmmakers have taken a lot of artistic license. But the film presents an opportunity to explain that some of the basic background is right. Humans are indeed increasingly changing the climate and this is quite a dangerous experiment, including some risk of abrupt and unforeseen changes. After all, our knowledge of the climate system is still rather limited, and we will probably see some surprises as our experiment with the atmosphere unfolds. Luckily it is extremely unlikely that we will see major ocean circulation changes in the next couple of decades. At least most scientists think this will only become a more serious risk towards the end of the century. And the consequences would certainly not be as dramatic as the superstorm unregistered trademark depicted in the movie. Nevertheless, a major change in ocean circulation is a risk with serious and partly unpredictable consequences, which we should avoid. And even without events like ocean circulation changes, climate change is serious enough to demand decisive action. I think it would be a mistake and not do the film justice if scientists simply dismiss it as nonsense. For what it is, a blockbuster movie that has to earn back $120 million production cost, it is probably as good as you can get. For this type of movie for a very broad audience it is actually quite subversive and manages to slip in many thought-provoking things. I'm sure people will not confuse the film with reality, they are not stupid, they will know it is a work of fiction. But I hope that it will stir their interest for the subject, and that they might take more notice when real climate change and climate policy will be discussed in future. In 2008, Yahoo! Movies listed The Day After Tomorrow as one of top 10 scientifically inaccurate movies. The film was criticized for depicting several different meteorological phenomena occurring over the course of hours, instead of the possible time frame of several decades or centuries. Awards and nominations. Criticism. There was some controversy regarding the casting of Kenneth Welsh as the Vice President of the United States due to his striking physical resemblance to then Vice President Dick Cheney. Roland Emmerich later confirmed that he deliberately chose Welsh for that very reason. Emmerich stated that the characters of the President and Vice President in the film were intended to be a not-so-subtle criticism of the environmental policies of the presidency of George W. Bush. The White House did not respond to requests for comment on the film. In response to accusations of insensitivity by including scenes of New York City being devastated less than 3 years after the September 11 attacks, Emmerich claims that it was necessary to depict the event as a means to showcase the increased unity people now have when facing a disaster, because of 9/11. A number of scientists were critical of the scientific aspects of the film. Daniel P. Schrag, a paleoclimatologist and professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Harvard University, expressed both support and concern about the film, stating that on the one hand, I'm glad that there's a big-budget movie about something as critical as climate change. On the other, I'm concerned that people will see these over-the-top effects and think the whole thing is a joke. We are indeed experimenting with the Earth in a way that hasn't been done for millions of years. But you're not going to see another ice age at least not like that. Marshall Shepard, a research meteorologist at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, expressed similar sentiments, stating that I'm heartened that there's a movie addressing real climate issues. But as for the science of the movie, I'd give it a D- or an F. And I'd be concerned if the movie was made to advance a political agenda. Andrew Weaver, a climatologist at the University of Victoria, said, "It's the towering inferno of climate science movies, but I'm not losing any sleep over a new ice age, because it's impossible." Home Media. The Day After Tomorrow was first released on DVD in North America on October 12, 2004, in both widescreen and full-screen versions. It also had a limited VHS release with a full-screen format. A 2-disc collector's edition containing production featurettes, 2 documentaries, storyboards and concept sketches was released on May 24, 2005. The film was released in high-definition video on Blu-ray disc in North America on October 2, 2007, and in the United Kingdom on April 28, 2008, in full 1080p with a lossless DTS HD master audio track but with few bonus features. The film made $110 million in DVD sales, bringing its total film gross to $652,771,772. See also: Historical events, 1993 Storm of the Century, a large cyclonic storm that occurred on March 12 for Euro 13, 1993, on the east coast of North America. Books and literature, The Coming Global Superstorm, a book on which the movie is based, 50 Degrees Below, a Kim Stanley Robinson novel in which greenhouse warming similarly disrupts the Gulf Stream. The rate of cooling is somewhat less exaggerated, 6 degrees, Our Future on a Hotter Planet, a non-fiction book, Time of the Great Freeze, a novel by Robert Silverberg about a second ice age, The World in Winter, a 1962 book by John Christopher about the beginning of a new ice age, film, Ice, a 1998 film with a similar premise starring Grant Show, Udo Kier, and Eva LaRue, 2012, Knowing, television, The Midnight Sun, an episode of The Twilight Zone in which Earth is rapidly heating, Superstorm, a 2007 BBC miniseries. 2 Days Before the Day After Tomorrow, an episode of South Park that parodies the film. References. External links: The Day After Tomorrow at the Internet Movie Database, The Day After Tomorrow at AllMovie, The Day After Tomorrow at Box Office Mojo, The Day After Tomorrow at Rotten Tomatoes, The Day After Tomorrow at Metacritic, The Day After Tomorrow at Yahoo! Movies, The Day After Tomorrow, A Scientific Critique.